Why, hello, listeners. I have the author of the new book, Serial Fixer: Break Free from the Habit of Solving Other People's Problems, on the show. Sound good? I love it. Leah Marone is a psychotherapist and Yale clinical instructor with over 2 decades on the front line of personal growth for high achieving women, especially those wrestling with perfectionism, anxiety, and the urge to fix everyone else's problems. You're going to love this episode. We dive into it. Her approach is deeply rooted in practicality and mindfulness, which aligns perfectly with me as a mindful cognitive coach. She has led more than 20,000 therapy sessions. She has seen in real time the toll that burnout and people pleasing can take on individuals managing households and careers. You're going to love this story. She's been on many, asked us to talk on many different things like Psychology Today, Newsweek, The Atlantic, and now we have her on the Love Your Life show. So listen in, you're going to love this conversation. All right, Leah, thank you so much for coming on the Love Your Life show. I am thrilled that you are here and that you can help my listeners and myself. I wanted to start right away. You have a book that by the time this releases, it will be out so everyone can get their hands on it. And the title, you had me at the title, girl. And the title is Serial Fixer: Break Free from the Habit of Solving Other People's Problems. And I just was like, yes, please. So welcome. And can you explain a little about what a serial fixer is?
Oh, yes. And there's so many layers to serial fixing, right? But I think a serial fixer is someone who, again, has a high level of emotional intelligence, is typically able to read a room, nonverbals very quickly. They might be the secret keeper within their friend group, their family. They lead with a lot of empathy and compassion. They tend to be 5 steps ahead. And they also place themselves in the role of the fixer or the solver. So this could be in conversations, in relationships, and it's generally fueled by kind of this need to, soothe, to fix, to be connected, to please, to not let people down. And also like the critic within them constantly at them saying, if you don't do this, then you're probably not a good parent. If you don't do this, then you're probably not a good partner. If you don't do this, then you're probably not a good leader. And so you can see this critical kind of nudge that's constantly, fueling us to work really hard and take kind of false ownership or stock in other people's hurdles and struggles rather than just being that supporter. It's the recipe
Mm.
for exhaustion.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for exhaustion would be, well, yeah, I guess that would be helpful. Like if someone is sort of like, huh, I wonder if I'm the serial fixer, how might they know if they are this fixer, especially if they've always viewed themselves as sort of helpful or caring?
Yeah, and it does. It comes from a good place. Like it is. It's a way we kind of associate love and caring and, and nurturing, which again, it is. But you can see too that it almost like if we can structure and fill a role externally and kind of work really, really hard at that, it pulls us away from sometimes the work that we need to do internally.
Hmm.
And it also, is just this perpetual cycle of urgency and being 2 or 3 steps ahead. And so we enter roles, or I'm sorry, conversations with this view that, oh, well, I need to give them advice. I need to soothe. I need to fix. Not only will this make me feel purposeful, but it's also going to deepen our connection, right? But oftentimes, serial fixers are working so hard at their relationships, but there's like a disconnect. They're
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily feeling fulfilled. And sometimes it leads to resentment because these relationships are highly imbalanced.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. I'm just nodding along, and I'm like, there's so many things here. What stuck out to me is where you were talking about, when we're looking to them, like externally, being good enough. Am I a good enough mom? Does that person think I'm good enough as a mom, as a partner, as a employee, and then you said, where it's an internal job. Um, and can you speak a little to that?
Yeah. It is. I mean, I think a lot of times we're looking for that external validation
Mm-hmm.
of, and we have these associations oftentimes that if I'm not kind of working and stressed and doing all that I can at every moment of the day, then I'm not good enough. I'm probably not executing my role the way that I should be. And you'll see this oftentimes in parenting, like where your child might have the sigh or the look of distress or just like, oh, and immediately our fixer mode kind of goes into like overdrive where we're like, well, let's do this. Well, let's do this. How about this? What if we do that? And so you start to go into this fixer solver role to alleviate that,
Mm-hmm.
but also confirm for yourself, like, this is what good moms do.
Mm-hmm.
If my child is under distress, if my child is feeling anything hard or negative, I must not be doing my job.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So how do we start doing something different there? Like, because what I'm hearing from you is I mean, that's like the worst case scenario ever is to be looking to our teenagers for our self-worth, having raised my kids. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, that is, they're gonna sigh and they're gonna roll their eyes. And I know as a mom, I would always be in it felt very uncomfortable. Um, to me, if I was so connected to their opinion of me, like that they think I'm doing the wrong thing by taking their cell phone, at night, or not letting them, any of these things. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you help people shift from this needing that, it's sort of outside of themselves, like they're sort of emotionally outsourcing an external validation into that more internal place?
Yes, it is. And I think really it takes repetitions. It
Mm-hmm.
takes, just like how we physically get in shape, we have to get a lot of repetitions with this mentally and emotionally. And we're working on something. We're working on shifting something. And really it's about first that data collection and really being aware of how do I show up in interactions?
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I immediately, without validating the person, without asking maybe a follow-up question, without saying maybe tell me more, am I already jumping to assumptions? Maybe where I have a deficit and I didn't do something correctly, and now this person is in this position, or, already doing the processing skills prematurely for this person, giving them advice over, relating prematurely, like all of these things. If you're jumping into those steps right out of the gate to oftentimes soothe your own discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good indicator. And it takes practice, but that's a really good indicator that you can shift from that supporter rather than that solver.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you start doing that is first and foremost to start by validation. And what I mean by validation is letting that person, whether it's your teenager or your partner or a friend, let them know that you are trying to decode the message that they are sharing verbally and non-verbally. And that can come in many forms. That can come with a head nod, as you're doing now. That can come with eye contact. That could come with a sigh. That could come with, that seems like a lot. That could come with paraphrasing, but
Mm-hmm.
just you pausing and keeping that ownership with that person and letting them know that you're working collaboratively and not grabbing their tangled ball of yarn and trying to untangle it in front of their very eyes.
Yeah, yeah. So I like that. What I'm hearing you say is we need to slow it down. I've, done a lot of work with, and a lot of my listeners have had some childhood trauma or some, more
Mhm.
complex, just maybe not the big T, but like just complex experiences of consistent needing to pay attention to other people, maybe being in that hypervigilant place. And so, of course, our nervous system is going to be ignited pretty quickly when someone maybe thinks we aren't being a good enough mom or a good enough. And so the slowing it down is something I'm hearing you say, to start small, um, and to not discount just the general awareness and learning, that one can get from listening to conversations like this, from reading your book, and to start, not paying so much attention to them, but what are we thinking? How do we interact in relationships? And is what I'm hearing you say. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. That was very well said. And I think, thinking about too, like, are we taking the bait? And
Mm,
what I mean by that is, let's say someone says, like, I have an example actually from someone I was working with a few years ago. I remember her coming into my office and saying, my husband, we're getting ready for Christmas and we're pulling out all the Christmas decorations. And he opens a box and he pulls out this ornament that, we use as a decoration outside. And he says, "Do these need batteries?" And she said, "Of course they do." And we didn't have any. So I had to go run to the store. I had to go do this. And
Mm.
I forgot this. And I had to go back, came back, put the batteries in, start hanging. And he's the whole time just sitting on the couch. I mean, can you believe that? And I said, "Well, you actually didn't answer the question." And she kind of looked at me really like shocked. And she's, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, he asked you if there were if these take batteries."
Mm-hmm.
And you immediately jumped to step 17 and filled in every crack and crevice and made all these assumptions and took ownership. It did not meet him and the question where it was. And
Mm.
she goes, "Oh my God, I totally did." And so I
Yeah.
said, "What if you could rewind? And if he said, 'Do these need batteries?' And you just answered with a yes or no and
Yeah.
paused and left the ownership with him and the decision to maybe ask a follow-up question or for him to activate and look to see if you have batteries and to kind of, I mean, you took it all from him and then you can see where that builds resentment. There you
Well,
go.
I was going to say you took it all from him and then we're pissed at him. And
Yeah.
that's
Then you're
and
pissed.
that's hard to hold, I think, for, I know that has been for me, where like for me to see my responsibility in the pattern
Mm-hmm.
where, because it's like him saying, "Does this need batteries?" I immediately would have that nervous system reaction like, okay, someone needs, something. And I, as you said, you're 17 steps ahead and you're already there. And you had said that earlier too about being 5 steps ahead of people. And I think listeners, I want to bring focus to that again so we don't over skip that, because that is one of the things to look out for. If someone says, "I'm hungry," or your spouse says, "I'm stressed," like we're spending more time in our head solving their problems and figuring out their lives, and or mom calls and says she's lonely. We're the ones googling the bridge clubs or the running, dropping what we're doing and running over there, and just having some awareness of that and starting to just slow it down a little, which could be as simple as you said, is just taking a breath. Like, just for me, I had this mantra when I was recovering from this. I'm still recovering, but but I just talk less, say less, talk less, listen more. Like, that you have one mouth, two ears. And then I would just sort of close my lips and just really try, like in my head I'd be saying all the things, and but just trying to get back to safety in my system, because they might be struggling. I mean, we are busy people and we have people in our lives that we care about, but again, is it a problem that, like, being that serial fixer, is it my problem to fix, or is it something that they are able to fix themselves? Or another thing you said is support, don't solve. Like, can we support there? Can we, instead of jumping in and running to get the batteries and feeling resentful and exhausted and like nobody gets you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you think like, I'm trying so hard. I'm
Yes.
doing X, Y, and Z. And why is this not working? Why is,
Mm-hmm.
I'm craving closeness. I'm craving intimacy. I'm craving all these things and it's not happening. And what gives? And it's confusing. And you can see where that resentment really starts to build. And then we're critical of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like, how can I still lead with empathy and still lead with that compassion and that love? But just really, meet the situation, the person where they're at, and support, don't solve. You
Mm-hmm.
nailed it.
Yeah, this is, listeners will be familiar with my popcorn parenting approach, or I talk about lovingly detached. But to I might link some of those episodes below. But this is, really the breaking the urge that you speak about in your, subtitle, break free from the habit of solving other people's problems. I guess you don't say breaking the urge. I think you said that as you were talking about having a, helping people with that urge, because it feels so important in the time, with, if the husband is like, "Do these need batteries?" It's like you're at the store before you realize what you're doing, or the kid says they're hungry and you're, "Oh, you don't have the bars I like I'm online ordering them or getting, like before I even realize that this isn't a 2-year-old that is going to starve if I don't get him the bars that he likes." There's
Mhm.
so that sort of fixing the urge is really important. And I guess what I hear you saying is that it is work worth doing, even though it feels hard in the moment. The reason why we're doing it, because then we're going to feel better. It feels bad in the moment, but if we don't do it, then we're going to feel exhausted, resentful, irritated, frustrated. I felt all those things, over functioning. We're just, and I guess, could you speak a little about this loneliness that we can feel of that? You spoke a little bit about like feeling like nobody really gets me. Like we might think that, oh, we're so helpful and we're creating this connection in our relationships. And yet, what I see in my clients and myself is a feeling of disconnect and that
Mhm.
feeling of like nobody understands everything I do, or the unappreciated. Is that
That's
something you've
right.
seen or you could speak
Abs
to?
Absolutely. It is. It's kind of creating these micro codependencies, and it's really fueling like these very rigid, powerful associations we have, where it's like, if I don't get the bars for
Mm-hmm.
my child, if I don't do this, if I don't have all these things in stock that they like, then again, it's fuels that critic kind of pops up, and it fuels that association of like, well, then you're not a good enough mom. Like, you're not
Mm-hmm.
doing your job. Like, you're failing. And that's
Mm-hmm.
so rigid. And
Mm-hmm.
you can see where like we get in our head and we fuel kind of that negative self-talk pattern, those false narratives. And it really does. It pulls us away sometimes because we're so busy getting sucked into that. And we're extending and overextending, and we're doing and we're doing and we're doing. It kind of sometimes gets in the way of us really capitalizing on some of those moments when that is time for connection.
Mm-hmm.
We're so in our head, we're so critical, we're so, and it does, it kind of pulls away from those moments where they might be intimate, they might be a deep sense of connection, they might be a beautiful moment, and we just can't be present.
Mm-hmm.
And
It
so there is
really,
mhm.
yeah, and it feels so uncomfortable. I remember fairly recently one of my sons was applying for a job and he didn't get it, and he came home, and my instinct was to be like, well, you can get an interview here. You can do, like, I wanted to get into that fix it, the solve. And I overrode that instinct. I rode out my urge. And I just said, oh, that sounds really hard. Like, you must,
Mhm.
like, what are you feeling right now? And we had the nicest conversation. And it was, everything they say about boys not being in touch with their emotions. Like he was able to say he felt really disappointed. He was disappointed in himself. He wished that he had done a little more research about the company ahead of time. And it was a really nice connecting relationship. So there was that from sort of my mom heart filling up. And then later, what ended up happening is he went out, he did do some of the due diligence that he recognized in himself, because he sort of paused and was like, okay, what did I, why, maybe he took some responsibility for it. And then he got a job, and he then had the experience of feeling pride. Like, I went out, I did it, I persevered. And it wasn't like a mom handed this other interview to me. Like, because that's sometimes what, when we're in that fixing mode, we're stealing their own, journey. I say, like, the dignity of their experience, that them having that hardship. So we're stealing from us that possible connection, and then we're stealing from them the opportunity to, like, what feels really good in life is going through some of these hardships and then persevering. And that pride is one of my favorite emotions to feel. Like, look at me, I didn't get the job and I still went out and did these other 3 interviews and got that. So I think that's
Yeah.
important to look at.
Oh,
um
what an amazing example. I mean, Susie, you executed that beautifully with your son, because you approached and you like validated, you created that space. It was collaborative. You weren't trying to grab ownership or stock. He felt that. He was able to open up. He was able to explore, collect his own data. He was able to learn from it, execute. I mean, and like you said, he went through like this whole process and he had ownership the whole time, but he felt your support
Support,
with
right?
it.
It's
That's
that
amazing.
support, not
Amazing.
solving. And yes, and the only reason I could do that is because I haven't done that so many other times before then. And so I did my
Mhm.
own responsibility. And I guess the point I don't want to skip over is how uncomfortable it felt to me physically in the moment. And what you were speaking to is, like, if I had gotten done with that conversation and I didn't, there was no, like, when we ended it, he wasn't like he was still feeling disappointed and really upset at sort of the world. Like, he was in a negative energy, well, all these jobs and blah blah blah. um so I didn't, I didn't see what was happening in the future. And I could have gone to be like, well, is that the, am I a good mom? Like, a good mom should, because we get in our heads about the lessons we need to teach our kids and all that, which again is back to what you're saying, is that, and I like, and that's another episode I will link below, called Manual Work, where we have sort of these instruction books of like what it means to be a good mom or what it means to be a good
Yes.
wife, or, and we often outsource that to someone. Like if I'm putting in my son's hand what it means to be a good mom, like he might have thought a good mom would then go call my friend who works at the restaurant and get him a job. Fine. But then I lose all my control and it's completely. So I like to define for me what makes a good mom, and listening to people like you that have, the research and the knowledge. And it's like, okay, no, that, like, even though it feels physically uncomfortable, this actually is the helpful thing for me to do in this moment, to not pass down this codependent patterning. Um,
Absolutely.
could we
And he was
pivot a
able,
little, and could you
mhm, sure.
speak a little about, you have a couple terms that you talk about that I love: emotional hangovers and compassion fatigue, or either of those, if you could explain a little more, because
Yeah,
I know.
absolutely. I mean, emotional hangovers, I think, when we think of hangover, we think of overindulging in something, maybe having a wild night, and then we have this hangover effect, right? And I think we have to remember that we can also have emotional hangovers. And what I mean by that is, when there's things that, will really challenge us, like whether it's difficult weeks, difficult chapters, difficult days, hours. And we do sometimes have to suppress certain things to stay focused, to stay in the game. And sometimes if we're not aware of kind of clearing out our own clutter, and acknowledging that, like, wow, I had to really maintain focus. I had to suppress X, Y, and Z to get through that. That was a lot of work. That was taxing. Let me clear some of that out. Let me validate, acknowledge myself, and maybe do some work that I needed to back then. If we don't do that, we will have this kind of hangover effect.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe an example is like if your in laws come to town, and you may love your in laws, but maybe that's a very triggering, taxing visit. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to kind of be on your A game in a certain way. You have to suppress certain things. It's a lot of energy. And you may feel like that was a great visit. That went really well. That's great. And they leave, and you have this like wave of anxiety, and you're exhausted. And you're like, what is happening? They're gone. It was a
Mm-hmm.
good visit. Why am I an anxious mess? Why am I feeling
Mm-hmm.
so out of sorts? Why am I exhausted? And that right there is kind of that hangover effect, where things that you maybe had to suppress and kind of really keep in check, it's your brain's way of clearing out that clutter. And so I like to really, it's uncomfortable, but I like to normalize that to some degree. It's almost like when you're really sore after intense workout.
Mm-hmm.
You worked really hard, and the next day you're like, oh my gosh, it's really hard for me to sit on the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like that. Your muscles are fatigued. They're working through
Mm-hmm.
something, and that's the hangover effect. And we can have those emotionally as well.
Yeah, and I think we're so quick to do what you said, like gaslight ourselves and just be like, why are you upset? It was a fine visit. Nothing happened. Like your father-in-law didn't do that thing. Instead of meeting ourselves with compassion and saying, why are you feeling this way? Well, let's actually look. Why am I some well, because you were holding it together the whole time, because you were sort of on edge, and to turn towards ourselves instead of against ourselves again. You do a lot of work on the inner critic and those inner voices. And I think recognizing here where there might be that voice inside of us that's not helping us. It's like, why are you so upset? It's like, okay, could we be a little more of like, okay, you are so upset. How do we support you? Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
very, because that's another thing I could have said to my son with the job. I could have said, well, why are you so upset? Like, you didn't, look at what you're wearing, or like, why are you so upset? There are other jobs to get. Like, it's easier to see sometimes when we're doing it outside of ourselves, but to
Mm-hmm.
keep when we're doing it inside and to see, we're like, it's over, get over it. Like, that's really not kind.
It's not.
It's
And there's this
like,
fear sometimes that it's like, is this just how it's going to be? Like, does anyone
mm,
else experience this? What is wrong with me? I should have my
mm,
stuff together. I'm in my 30s or my 40s or it's like,
yeah.
it's so critical, and it's very rigid and all or nothing thinking. And a lot of, my patients that I work with, we talk about like finding the gray. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't get into that black or white thinking, that
Mm-hmm.
all or nothing. It's so rigid, and you got
Mm-hmm.
to play fair.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you really need to find the gray. And if you have that critic inside of you that is just gnawing at you and the chatter is so loud, it's like really asking yourself and that part of you, what are you trying to protect me from? You're
Mm-hmm.
sending me 10 bodyguards when I only need one. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
is the deal? What is this protection, level of protection? And really then soothing that part of you, working with it and finding that gray and moving out of that rigidity. It's so
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
Yeah. Because what do you find they're trying to protect themselves from? Like you said, they're sending 10 protectors over. What is it there?
Yeah. So that critical voice, inside of us, or our inner critic or inner pleaser, all of that, they're trying to protect us generally from things that collectively humans we don't like to feel,
Mm-hmm.
right? We don't like to feel like incompetent. We don't like to feel embarrassed. We don't like to feel failure. We don't like to feel shame. We don't like to
Maybe
feel lonely.
disconnected, like if we're thinking of
Yeah.
that example with the in-laws or anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's just these protective parts of us, and generally they'll come in that form of the critic or the pleaser or the rescuer. They are working incredibly hard to
Mm-hmm.
protect us from feeling any of those things. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, again, I have to check in with myself where I'm like, whoa, 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 my critic again is sending me 10 bodyguards when I only need one.
Mm-hmm.
And let's really understand like, why is my critic working so hard? And how can I start to kind of soothe it and fact check the
Mm-hmm.
situation and pull from resilience rather than getting sucked into this vortex.
Well, and you said at one point, let's play fair. I really like that too, from a standpoint of like, let's be honest. When we're like, why are you so, anxious now? Or why are you feeling so exhausted? It was a fine visit. It's like, okay, can we be a little truthful? Like some radical honesty here with like, and because we do have those protective parts, so we don't feel the emotions. And it's like, let's just be it. Like maybe, yeah, actually, when I pause and take some breaths, I realized I felt a little disconnected and it felt like I didn't enjoy that as much as I wanted to. Or
Mm-hmm.
this isn't exactly what I wanted, or that I just was really on edge, or just being more honest there
Mm-hmm.
with her. Or I don't want to have to work so hard when my in laws are over. Any of
There you
that. Like
go.
we don't
Yeah.
necessarily, I find that a lot of us over functioners are reluctant to feel the emotion because then we feel like we have to do something,
Mm-hmm.
like just noting maybe that when the in-laws were there you felt lonely or you felt disconnected. Over functioners right away are going to be like, okay, so then what? Like what's this three-step plan to like, instead of just being like, maybe that, like, can I just sit with that for like right here right now, there's no race, like right now I'm okay, good to know, thank you buddy, like I'm feeling disconnected in this relationship. What if I don't have to do anything about it? Like
Yeah. You're
that
you're
piece,
absolutely
yeah.
right. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's like if you wake up in the morning and your calf is tight, your calf muscle's tight, do you immediately rush to the ER? I hope
Mm,
not. I hope you
right.
kind of think about like, ooh, maybe I slept weird. Maybe it was that really awesome workout I had yesterday. Maybe I need new shoes. You start to kind of think about, but you like see if your body just it works itself out as you get up and start moving. And if it's something where it gets more severe, it's more intense day after day, then you're like, yeah, okay, maybe I should take some more measures. Same with our emotions. I mean, things are fleeting. Sometimes we feel this wave of something. And to your point, we don't have to necessarily sound all the alarm bells and be like, what's wrong with me? This is just it. I'm doomed. See, I knew it would turn. It's more just like noted, data I collected. Let me see if there's a pattern here. Let me, be gentle with myself, maybe do a little extra, recovery here and there, and just see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all or nothing.
Yeah. So I would love, because I had an experience. I knew I was prepping for this interview, and it's like the universe gave me the perfect experience where my husband was having an emotional experience, and I was just noticing myself, and I was like, I need to talk to Leah and get some like actual words to say so that I am not solving, I am more supporting. Because I just want a wider toolbox here. And so say, someone, I'm even forgetting now what he was upset about. He just, like, there was something that was going on for him, and I knew he didn't want me to solve it for him,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like, I was trying to be a supportive wife, but saying things like, I'm sorry that's your experience, felt seemed like it would be a little dismissive.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some things, let's say like your kid comes to you, your teenage daughter, and she's really upset because her friend wasn't sitting with you at lunch, or her at lunch or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, gosh, in that scenario, I think especially with teenagers, it's when they pause, like you pause, and that's so hard because we want to fill that silence. But I
Mm-hmm.
think just letting them, because they're testing us too. Oftentimes, they're waiting to see if we're just going to jump in, like, oh, I know her mom, I'll give her a call, and they'll sit with you.
Yeah,
Just like
that's
all
like
of that.
getting the bait. Don't take the bait,
Yes,
don't get the
right. So
battery.
don't take the bait. I
Right.
think it's more so just creating, it's almost like viewing yourself as like this space creator. Like I'm going to create the space. I'm going to see, if you pause, I'm going to see if you continue to say more. And I love the phrase, like, after you've maybe validated, after you've maybe said like, oh, that does sound like a rough day, or, kind of
Mm-hmm.
use that empathy. Then
Mm-hmm.
you sometimes will just say like, tell me more.
Hmm. Yeah, tell me
And
more is one of my
I just
favorites.
love it.
Yeah.
I just love it because it's just tell me more, or you paraphrase, or you just say like, no, yeah, that's a lot. And it just gives people that freedom of like, I'm trying to process something and you're allowing me to externally process it.
Hmm.
And you'll start to see people, even your teenagers, start to maybe piece some things together.
Hmm.
And it may take a while. It may take, several conversations, but I think it's first that validation, that empathy piece. And when you're ready and when they're ready, moving into sometimes that inquiry piece of like, tell me more, or like,
Yeah.
what do you feel like your next step might be? Or,
Yeah.
have you been through something like this before? Like you're helping them kind of pull from their
Hmm.
own data.
Hmm. I like
And
that one. Have you been through this before?
yeah, and
Right.
accessing that resilience. So I do. I mean, it's of course you're going to add your own flavor. It depends on who you're talking with. We're all EQ savvy. I can tell this listener group is, and so it's more so just really just pacing yourself and meeting that person where they're at. It's
Yeah, you know what
hard.
I'm thinking? It's because I think my listeners are pretty good at doing the like, what are our next step part? Because that's that's like what they like. Like, okay, now let's see. Like, are you going
Yep.
to apply to three more jobs? I think it's more the validating part of just letting them like me with my son when he's having his big emotions, letting him have his big emotion and then letting me have my emotion with my son having his emotion. Or when my
Hmm.
husband was upset the other day, like letting my husband have that experience, not trying to rush in, well, what's your next step? Because that's not going to go so well with him, I know. And more me coming back to me. And again, this is like that serial fixer, like we're in their head, we need to be in our head. And one of the things I say is like, it's really hard for me when people around me are upset. I'm like, it's really hard for me to see them upset. And I appreciate the help with the adolescents because that's what's happening. I know a lot of listeners and a lot of just how we've been programmed is that we, as you said, like they might give us the bait. We have been sort of the therapists for other people in our life. Like, and I do see that sometimes in more like adult relationships and with my clients that the spouse might be waiting for the other, their partner to be like, well, this is because you had that experience when you were a kid, and like putting again 5 steps ahead. So what do we do there so that we're not, we can be more of a partner, not a therapist? What's
Yeah, it is. And sometimes, it is kind of, if you have that type of relationship, you're at this point in the conversation, it is sometimes asking that directly.
mm-hmm.
Just like, how can I support you with that? Or what
Mm-hmm.
would be helpful at this stage?
Mm-hmm.
Or, do you want to share more? Or do you want to revisit what we talked about 2 days ago? Like, I think sometimes, we don't have that script and removing that pressure that we have to say the right thing, or we
Mm-hmm.
have to, sometimes it's directly asking, like, would it be helpful for me to ask you some questions? Like, or would it
Mm-hmm.
be helpful to like look at maybe what your options might be at this stage? Like sometimes even just
Right.
asking and you'll get at that direct, like, no, no. And you'll be like, okay, cool. Like I'll pull
Right.
back. Like, but sometimes I think really viewing those conversations as collaborative,
Mm-hmm.
like collaborative. You're empowering, you're leading with empathy, and you're collaborating. And sometimes it is okay to check in and just be like, I'm not really sure what to say. What might be helpful, or what do you think would be, what do you need at this stage? And I had my daughter, I have two teenage daughters. And this was kind of like so hard for me because it was the earlier last week and she's going through a friend issue.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's upset. We kind of went through it. I was, giving her hugs and then I kind of said, what would be helpful right now, honey? And she said, it was good to talk, but I actually feel like I kind of want to be alone for a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, my mom, alarm bells were like, no, 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 wait, no, I need to hug you more. I need to be here. Well,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk it out. Like, you need to
Right.
feel better. And that really took a lot for me to say, absolutely. Can I check in
Mm-hmm.
with you later?
Yes.
And
So
that was
that
meeting.
question I just
Yeah.
want to highlight. What would be helpful for you right now? That's a really good one.
Mhm.
Because I see a lot of my listeners taking the collaboration too far in their adult relationships. That's where they get into the serial fixing, where they do end up in this feeling the resentment and the exhaustion and almost like their husband is their other child and like and then the husband sort of putting the bait out there like I'm really upset, that's but I love that like, what would be helpful for you right now. I also like something you said just came up with me. A lot of the coaching I do around is sort of differentiating between love and control, and how sometimes my helping and our helping is actually like trying to manage our own discomfort or fear in trying to control them and fix, like we're thinking, we want to rush to that collaboration place and more from a control place, not a love place. Is that something you've seen or?
Absolutely. It's like if you're okay, then I can be okay. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you get there fast so that I can have some relief. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which when
Mhm.
I flip it and it's me, like that doesn't feel good.
No.
Yeah, like it feels so good when, when it's just like letting me, have whatever experience I'm having and
Mhm.
not rushing into that, the
Mhm.
solving, like letting just support, what do I need? And that skill of, I guess, also just then something to point out to all listeners that this isn't something we're born knowing, and it often wasn't modeled for us. So getting books like yours, I mean, I created the Love Your Life School because I'm like, that we weren't taught this sort of stuff, and getting that initial piece of knowledge, and then also we've got to get out there and practice it. Like listening to a podcast isn't enough. We need to actually open our mouth and say the thing, and it's going to feel awkward, and the other person might be like, what is happening? Usually you tell me what to do right away, or usually, that, so there's going to be some awkwardness, and on the other side of that awkwardness are some really healthy relationships.
Yeah. And that's so, you make such a good point where like when you're trying something new and you're trying to reframe something, show up differently, it takes reps. I mean, and it's not about perfection. It's not about nailing it every time.
Mm-mm.
But think about too the power of the circle back. So like if you do, you're like, oh my gosh, I just totally solved that. I jumped in, I serial fixed again. Like it's okay to circle back and say, you know what? I thought about our conversation.
Yes.
And I really wish that I would have shared this, or I would have given you a little more space to share this.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when you're changing that up with someone, and you are approaching things differently, and they might be like, what are you? Yeah, you normally give me all the answers. I think that too sometimes calls for some disclosure and vulnerability of just saying, you know what? I've picked up on some patterns and I've realized that I jump in way too fast and I'm not
Mm.
really giving you that opportunity to kind of figure this out. And it's not that I don't trust you. I think I was just like jumping the gun. So I'm going to really try to work on that. And
Mm.
that too is so good, not only for you to hear, but it lets that
Mhm.
person know too, like, oh, okay, this is going to be different. I need to kick into gear and start getting some reps in myself.
Yeah. And I want listeners to hear how you just portrayed that. You weren't like, I'm noticing some patterns that you do this, because like that you don't fix you're always leaning on me. You said, I'm noticing some patterns that I jump in too fast, or I interrupt, or I'm not really letting you have the experience in the feelings that you're having. And so I'll be working on this. That 100% leads to a more openness with the other person, because it's not that you. I love it. And I think this is a good place to wrap up. And for listeners, I will put the link to your book to get your book for sure. But is there anything that you feel that we haven't touched on, or, one last thing that you want to say to the person who's listening that's like, I am so a serial fixer, Leah, like, that you feel that we haven't addressed?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think, for all of you, again, kind of maybe filtrating this information through your critic and like, oh, I'm such a serial fixer. How did I get this way? Number one, you're not alone. Like, this is a huge thing. And just remember that it typically does happen because you have high emotional intelligence. You're able to read a room, you're able to problem solve very quickly. You're
Mm-hmm.
able, so there's a lot of strengths and superpowers involved in this. But you
Mm-hmm.
can see, like with anything, when there's too much of something or too little, it sometimes has the reverse effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so think about like being patient with yourself and
Mm-hmm.
thinking about like you haven't done this catastrophic huge damage and oh my gosh, don't think that way. It's just you're working on something, you're improving something. And I think just again, it's like you're getting in shape. You need reps.
Yeah. Well, and like getting in shape, it's like any day's a good day to start. And I love that. And like us sitting here being like, I haven't done a bench press ever, like that's so unhelpful. So it's I think for the listener to just have some comfort here and know like they're hearing this message and learning about your work at the exact right time and exactly how it's supposed to be happening for their relationships, because I would not have handled my son in the way that I handled him if I hadn't had other moments where I was rushing in and being the fixer.
Mhm.
And that's, we grow at the speed of our suffering, so that's how we get it. So some of that, just not bringing in that inner critic, I think is really helpful. Thank you, Leah. This is going to feel like a warm hug, I think, for my listeners, and I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Oh my gosh, it was my pleasure. I feel like we could have talked all day.
Yes, I think we could have. There's a lot here, which is why everyone needs to get your book, Serial Fixer. It's available everywhere. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.